Hello and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm Renee and I read a lot. So that's why today we're going to go over the books that I've read in the last week and talk about them. Wow, like shortest intro I've ever done. I overtalk. So we'll start with The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. I hope I'm saying that correctly. This book on the surface is about a dad and a daughter and their fig tree. Yes, the fig tree has a narrative and perspective. In England in the 2010s, it's not specified exactly when, but it has flashbacks to the 1970s in Crete, where her parents met and are from, where the island was divided, Greek and Turkish. There was obviously a lot of conflict. And I really liked a lot of aspects of this book. I gave it 4 stars. I liked the history of Crete. It's a commentary on tourism versus what is actually happening on the island, or in general, the places where tourists go because it's beautiful without paying attention to the cultural significance of the place. It really made me think introspectively about like myself as an immigrant and as a tourist. Like, am I being respectful? Am I being the person that I want to be? Am I just seeing what I want to see? Am I seeing what's actually going on? And all of that is really good stuff, and I'm grateful for that. However, I think that a lot of the like emotional things thrown in there, like the things that are supposed to make you like ooh because they like have a lot of emotional impact, weren't executed super well. Spoiler warning, jump to here if you do not want the spoilers. There's an unwanted pregnancy narrative and there's an alcoholism narrative, and both don't really just like throw the emotional punch that like they could have, because I feel like they're kind of glossed over maybe a bit. Maybe not the pregnancy one so much as the alcoholism one. Is just like kind of like thrown in there for like emotion flakes. So yeah, I would recommend it. I don't think it's a perfect book, but I would recommend it. I think it's one of those books that you read and would stay with you for a little bit. That was book 123 of the year. Number 24 was Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave that one 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. My friend Ellie recommended it to me and I devoured it. I was like, wow. I think that she comes up with the most interesting ways to tell stories. She doesn't tell them the same way every time. She doesn't like have a formula. She really comes out here with like, okay, you know, Evelyn Hugo, and we're going to talk about her through the lens of like her 7 husbands, and she's telling her story. Daisy Jones and the Six, and she's coming out here like as though it's a transcript of a documentary. That's what they're called. And Malibu Rising is like through every hour of the day of like this big party where the 4 siblings, the Rivas siblings, are all going, you know, they throw this party every year and they all have their own secrets and they're all like going to come out at this party, but like kind of follows like every hour of the day is the chapters. But then it also throws in, you know, flashbacks to their parents and some other characters and their opinions, and I don't know, I thought it was really well done. I really vibed with the characters, Nina especially. Yeah, the whole backstory, the siblings. She paints really, really, really compelling characters. Like her characters, all of them, feel like they have a whole backstory, a whole motivation, a whole life. I feel like every one of them is a real person, and I gave that 5 stars, so that was great. Number 125 was Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's kind of a small indie author. Up and coming though, so you know, you might hear of her a little bit more in the future. But for whatever, yeah, no, all jokes aside, Mansfield Park is not talked about, and I kind of read a little bit of the criticism of it online. So the whole premise is that there's, you know, a young girl and she gets sent to go live with her cousins because her parents can't like afford to take care of her. Kind of like all of Jane Austen's premises. And then they grow up, her and she has this favorite cousin, Edmund, and then some other characters get introduced and there's like conflict and like, oh, who's everyone gonna marry? And the main character's name is Fanny, which is a choice, but it's Georgian England, so I guess Fanny was more popular then. To each their own. And people, so I read a little bit of the criticism online for this book. People don't like the main character, Fanny, and I don't really understand why. She's just shy, she's timid, but she really sticks to her moral ground. She's like, no, I'm gonna do what I think is right. Even though she's shy and timid. I feel like that's what, it's early 1800s England. What are you expecting? And yeah, Edmund kind of sucks. That's fair. And yeah, it's kind of weird she grows up with her cousin and falls in love with him. But again, it's the time period. But I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars. So that's just life. Number 126 was Lives We Sing to the Sea by Sarah Underwood. That's the page. Listen, I intentionally do not read the Goodreads reviews or the commentary or whatever, if I can help it, before diving into a book, because I don't want to form premature opinions of the book. That being said, this is allegedly, it's branded as an Odyssey retelling, which I just gotta tell you straight off the bat, it is not an Odyssey retelling by any stretch of the imagination. If by Odyssey retelling she means that it, in theory, in her head, takes place in ancient Greece, sure, but there's a lot more Greek myths and whatever. If you're an Odyssey retelling is a guy who goes and gets lost for 10 years and has adventures with giants and witches and stuff. This is just it's Ithaca, sure, that's where Odysseus is from. But Poseidon has put a curse on Ithaca, and it's up every year 12 women have to die to satisfy this curse. And one of the women, it's up to her to break this curse. What about that as Odyssean in nature? Am I missing something? Did I not read the same Odyssey that everybody else read? It's right off the bat, it's not an Odysseus retelling. And then like, yeah, there's a lot of emotion in the book, and the book is written to emotionally pull your heartstrings, but there's a love triangle. And that does not, it did not need to be there. I didn't like it. I didn't like the love triangle. I can deal with a love triangle. I have been known to deal with many a love triangle. Didn't deal with this one. And it doesn't even really get resolved in the end. Spoiler alert, again. They just both the love interests die. And that's the resolution. They just die. And then, so already I was like, okay, not necessarily my cup of tea right off the bat, but you know, we'll keep going. And then it just kind of felt like the ancient Greek stuff, like do you know when you're like a kid or whatever, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna be a Greek goddess or whatever for Halloween, and then you make a toga out of a bedsheet, and that's your way of representing ancient Greek culture. That's what this felt like. Like none of it felt, I didn't feel like I was in ancient Greece. Like all of the language was incredibly modern. All the like food and stuff it just like, it did not bring me into ancient Greece, even in the slightest. It just felt really like we picked that setting, but we could have picked any setting for this book. We could have made up our own world. We could have done a lot that wasn't ancient Greece with this book, so I don't know why we picked that. I have no idea why. Like, I have no idea why ancient Greece was the setting. Like, you could have made your own world where you have, like, your own god of the sea, your own whatever, and it would have been so much better, but, like, ancient Greece was just, it wasn't the move. And I love a Greek mythology retelling. I love a Greek mythology retelling. I will eat it up every time. And this was not an ancient Greek mythology retelling. This was like a fan fiction that took place in ancient Greece that nobody bothered to say, like, does it really take place in ancient Greece, or is this a fake world that you've made up and called ancient Greece? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like a fake world. Anyway, then I read the controversy and figured out that the author had never even read the full Odyssey. Which, how are you going to say you're retelling the Odyssey if you've never read the Odyssey in the first place? You don't know that you're retelling it, which makes so much sense because she's not retelling the Odyssey. It is in no way like a feminist retelling of the Odyssey or anything. Like, it's what? Anyway, I gave it 3 stars because it was emotional and the writing was good. It's just like, why? And then a really good duology though to follow it. A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. And this is the Elements of Cadence duology. And I loved this duology. I thought it was so good. I was blown away. I didn't even pick it up. I was at some bookstore, Books A Million maybe, with my husband. And I was like, hey, husband, why don't you pick me out a book for me to read? Just for fun. And he picked up A River Enchanted, and he was like, this seems like the kind of book that you would read. And I was like, maybe, but I'll buy it because I love you, and I'm going to encourage you to pick things out for me. And then I read it, and I was like, no, this is the kind of book I read. It's Scottish fairy tale fantasy, and where Lies We Sing to the Sea was like, oh, we're in ancient Greece, but it didn't feel like it. Or Enchanted feels like you're in olden Scotland. But it works. Like, it works this time because the words and the language and everything like puts you into that setting, and the world building is fantastic. And it's about, you know, there's a bard and he's been on the mainland for 10 years, but he goes back to his home island where the folk, the spirits, the probably, I would think of them as like fairies of the island, are very active, and there's girls that are going missing from his half of the island because their island is divided into two halves, two clans. And the bard has been called home to figure out why. And it is just, all the characters are built beautifully, the world is built beautifully, the story is beautiful. It's a beautiful tale. More people should read it. And then 129 and 130. It's also a little series. And then 129 and 130 is also a little series. Little. It's one book and like a half book, like a novella. It is A Kiss to Tell, which I then thought was To Keep, and then I realized was To Tell by Willow Winters, and then A Kiss to Keep was the 1.5 sequel. For context, I bought like the entire Discreet series that Willow Winters has because I loved her first, I'm gonna say like 16 out of that series, maybe 20. I was just like hooked on, like couldn't put down. The ones that I'm in now, like the part that I'm in now, which is maybe like 26, 27, 28, I'm a little bit like, I like my other ones so much. I don't know why I'm not liking these. Because some of her books are just so good, and like some of my favorite erotica romance books, but the ones I've been reading lately, I don't know why I feel bad that I don't vibe with them. So I gave A Kiss to Tell 3 stars. It's about a girl and a boy, and when she was in 9th grade and he was in 10th, they randomly kissed in a hallway. And then I don't really know what happens to them in between then and present day then, because it doesn't really explain that. And then they're like 20 maybe. The girl, Chloe, is having nightmares, reaches out maybe to Sebastian the boy, and Sebastian's kind of a bad boy, and they live in this really bad part of town, and Chloe's mom has died and she blames herself, and all of that is kind of intriguing. And then they get together, but I really don't understand them as a couple because I don't understand what happened in those 2 years, because there's a few times that it's implied that like he was watching her sleep, a la Edward Cullen, and there's a few times where she's like, oh, I would never, I don't know anything about him, but it's kind of like, oh, he took care of you, but you don't know anything about him, so I can't really tell if he took care of you and you knew about it or not. And then the whole end of the book wraps up and they introduce this other character and don't tell you anything about him. He just comes in for 10 pages. It was just I left the book confused, which I don't like leaving a book confused. And I thought maybe in the 1.5, the 70-page ebook that I bought, it will wrap it up for me. And you know what? I left with more questions, and I am confused about both of them. But I will give it to you that I was invested in their romance, so I gave it 3 stars. But it did not wrap up satisfactorily for me. So 3 stars. Anyway, that is what I've read this week. Let me know what you've read this week. I am curious to know. And let me know what I should read in this next upcoming week. Soon, my next video I want to put out would be a June recap / halfway through the year recap, which I might make into separate videos because they are kind of different. But yeah, let me know. Love to know what you want to see. Okay, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more and like the video if you liked it. And I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.